With abilities that are as flashy to spectators as they are satisfying to land for his player, Thresh needs little introduction to most of the League of Legends community. However, part of what makes Thresh plays impressive is how costly it can be to misuse or fail with his abilities. Not only will I tell you a few combos, including ones to maximize and guarantee your ability damage, but also what situation they are best for and how to hook smarter, not harder, overall relying less on luck and more on skill. And first, let's talk about some mechanics. When you land Q on an opponent, they are stunned for 1.5 seconds. While this tether remains between Thresh and the target, you are unable to auto-attack until that tether is broken. However, you are free to cast your other abilities while walking around, and cast everything except your ultimate while in your second Q, which is a dash to the hooked target. Therefore, the faster you end the tether, the sooner you can auto-attack. Let's first talk about a simple damage combo that can save you in a pinch and explain this mechanic a bit more. In a close range situation, let's say you've gotten into a scrap with a bruiser by accident or intentionally, then you can cast Q, and assuming it lands, immediately recast as soon as possible. The opponent will be stunned for the full 1.5 seconds, not accounting for tenacity, while you free yourself of your auto-attack restriction far faster. Before the stun ends, you can chain into Flay to extend the stun lock while dealing damage, creating distance, and all for free. It is not exactly burst in the traditional sense, but since the opponent can't reply once the hook has landed, it basically is, so long as it's a 1 versus 1 situation. Now let's look at the opposite side of things. What if you want it to be as long as is reasonably possible to keep the stun up? What's interesting here is that there is one more consideration when talking about this combo. As written like this, it's easy to imply that E comes after the second Q, so after the dash ends, right? What can happen there is if you leave it too long before going in or from too great a distance, the enemy may be able to move, react, or flash before your Flay. If you're still dashing to them, this could be in your favour or horribly out of your favour if they flash back into their team members or a turret, or to your major misfortune, both. If you leave the Flay too long after the Q tether breaks, they can flash away, react by stunning you, or otherwise avoid the Flay follow-up, preventing your chain CC. As mentioned before, you can cast E during your Q's dash. With some proper timing, even a long-range hook can still perfectly land Flay for a stun lock. Within reason, of course. A max distance hook with 2 pulls on the Q. You can either go in after the first pull or the second pull, sometimes before the first, but that seems inconsistent to be honest. Then flying in and hoping to land Flay gives a window of opportunity for the enemy to react, i.e. not a perfect stun lock. Replies from the opponent can cause unforeseen circumstances that may shift the fight out of your favour. There's plenty of times where small things like this won't matter, but remember there are still moments where it will, and optimising your crowd control can be a worthwhile habit. That said, there are other situations where you might not want to get your crowd control out as soon as possible, and will instead want to save Flay in time for someone's dash, such as Lucian's E. There are always different things to consider for unique situations and champions, and you'll have to learn those as you go, but having reliable, all-purpose combos practiced 100 times will go much further than having practiced 100 other combos once. Let's get flashy.
The fuck?
Stop. I know you want to flash and land a Q. They won't see it coming, right? You'll flash out of nowhere, land the hook on that AD carry, perfectly chain your Flay, and in awe of the size of your balls, they will stumble into your ult wall and die, while the rest of the team fall apart and everybody claps. Stop. Failing a hook is one thing. You may have up to a 20-second cooldown if you miss at level 1 death sentence, and though you can max Q and buy CDR to soften this punishment, you cannot buy CDR and level up Flash, except with Ionian's boots, but shut up. Not only that, but aggressively flashing in like I always see can put you in a much more dangerous situation, and with your main TC ability gone for a while, you might have very little going for you in winning the oncoming fight. That doesn't mean you can't flash hook, you definitely can, but you should go for it when there's enough factors in play for you to have confidence it will land. Such as, the following tips also work for normal hooks, but you should consider them even more when thinking about flashing for it. They are already stunned or slowed by an allied ability. A good example is a Lux or Morgana Q from long range. If they throw one out nonchalantly and it happens to catch a good target, you can flash into position, if necessary, to land your hook. Obviously, don't flash if you can hook from where you're already standing, that would be ridiculous. Slows are a bit different since you still have a chance to miss and enemies still have a chance to juke you. If the slow is strong enough, you can usually find a good middle ground where your hook will hit whether they juke you or not, but if they juke especially early then you might miss with this anyway. They certainly aren't guaranteed, but you will have to assess very quickly if they're worth going for. Slows go great in combination with they're obstructed by terrain. I'm not talking about Anivia walls, though they certainly help too, but a common trap people fall into is standing between the tower and the wall of the lane. From this position, there's only two directions they can walk, and if they are slowed as well, then it's actually quite close to a guarantee that you can land a flash hook or a normal hook. Naturally, if they are a dash happy champion like Akali or Zed, you shouldn't be trying to flash hook unless you know their dashes are on cooldown. Sure, flash hooking and predicting where their flash or dash is going to go is easily on the top 3 most satisfying nut moments for Thresh mains, up there with the actual 100-0 one-shot auto attack, but as much as we may fantasize, it's pretty unlikely that you'll land such a play. Speaking of terrain, enemies that are turning corners tend to be much easier to predict, especially because the linear distance between the two of you becomes shorter as they turn the corner. If they're hugging the wall to move as fast as they can, it becomes even easier to predict where they will land. With Fog of War in play, you can try to land these blindly, but don't see them as a free flash hook, because a prediction is only a prediction unless you have access to Epitaph and King Crimson. And finally, of course, if an enemy has shown time and time again that they cannot dodge skill shots at all, maybe you can confidently snipe them with a flash hook. Though, players like that usually don't need that much commitment to remove from the battle anyway. There are other factors to landing hooks, but there are too many to count, and these are the main things that come to my mind when I think about helping you land long-range hooks. Long-range hooks are unreliable, no matter what we think about our ability to predict and aim ahead. Some enemies juke, some don't. Lots of enemies dash, but there's no telling where and even if they will use them to dodge you. So since they're quite down to chance most of the time, maybe it's best not to add an extra punishment by gambling your flash cooldown too. However, there are easier ways to land Q, such as with this combo. Simply enough, Flay slows the enemy after the knockup, allowing you to more easily land the hook. By flaying them towards you, not only is it instant so long as they're in range, but it drives them closer to you in addition to slowing, which almost always guarantees your Q landing unless they flash. Even if they do, the slow will linger, so if they flash early, you can aim a fairly reliable hook in their direction to drag right back in. But movement speed such as Relentless Hunter, Shurelier's, Fleet Footwork and Deadman's Plate, as well as slows such as Stormrazor and Bilgewater Cutlass and its evolutions, can help you with that if necessary. Brushes can help you sneak close enough as well, and failing even that, a flash flay is far more reliable than a flash hook since it's certain to hit so long as you aim it right.
Hey, matched it.
You might have noticed some AD items mentioned there, so now's a good time to bring up the max damage and also max straight utility combo. This is definitely worth learning, and I can tell you that because I honestly haven't been doing this correctly until maybe a couple of months ago. What I used to do by habit was Q, drag them twice, E to pull them in one more time to be within my R when I cast it afterwards. This ideally traps them inside the box where they have to walk out and take damage. The reality is that they can either, much like a Veigar E, stay inside and fight, not taking any damage or slows from the box, or flash out of it to avoid the box entirely. This also applies if you were to dash in an ult, with or without Flay. With the Q dash centering you on your target, they will almost never be in Flay range of your ult walls. Unless after your Q dash you knock them back in the direction you came from after you've landed on the opposite side. But even with this, during the cast time of the box, whilst you haven't CC'd them with Flay, they have enough time to flash out like we mentioned earlier. At point blank though, I would recommend this combo because doing the other recommended way that I'll tell you in a minute, you basically have to cast ultimate assuming that your Q is going to hit and it might not, and then you'll look really stupid. However, if you instead land hook and immediately when you confirm it's hit, activate the box as Q drags them in, and if necessary knock them into the wall with E, this guarantees damage from your abilities and a massive slow from your ultimate as well, leaving them in auto attack range. At extremely close ranges, you'll have to do a bit more moving around. Land Q, then immediately press R, then drag them towards the walls. If you don't make it, try and knock them into them with Flay. At longer ranges it takes a bit more effort. Depending on the angle of your ultimate, the enemy might land just outside of your box wall after your combo, taking no damage and no 99% slow from the box. However, all you need to do is walk up for just a moment after Q lands, then press ultimate and knock them into it. Most of the time you don't need to do this, but for those times when you do, you'll wish you practiced this little walk up, and it's certainly something I'm guilty of not doing in times of need as well. Naturally, you associate max damage with an AD top lane Thresh, but with souls giving AP and on-hit damage, and support items now giving AD, this kind of combo will surely help support Thresh maximize his damage as well, and even failing that is a guaranteed triple pull and 99% slow. Why would you not want that? Before we end, I'll give one last, extremely niche, super secret combo I've discovered recently. Q-Flash does absolutely nothing.
There's more. No.
QQ Flash, on the other hand, does actually do something rather interesting. As we mentioned very early on, you are locked out of auto attacks during Q until the tether is broken, i.e. it times out after 1.5 seconds, or you cast Q again and dash to your opponent. If you stop your Q dash by flashing though, this also breaks the tether instantly, allowing you to attack. Let's try timing how long it takes to auto attack after a hook in 3 different situations. In scenario 1, we simply auto attack straight after the hook with no double cast, no dash or anything like that. That gets us a time of 2.31 seconds from the release of the hook to the first instance of damage on the target dummy. In scenario 2, we double cast Q as mentioned before in order to get it off faster and cancel the tether. That gets us a time of 1.73 seconds, a fair bit faster than the first example. However, if we do cancel the dash with a flash, we get a time of 1.39 seconds. There is a noticeable difference in the time you spend locked out of your auto attacks between these, and that's not all either. By flashing and cancelling the dash, you can choose to put yourself at auto attack range rather than right next to them. This means that you can continue auto attacking them safely, and melee champions will not be able to immediately retaliate the way they normally could. This also means that you can position less dangerously after you catch someone in a teamfight. Most of the time if you're doing that though, as a support in any case, you'll probably have enough health and resistances from items and aftershock to benefit from diving right in and landing a nice flare and ultimate. That's why this particular one is so niche. As we can see, there are so many ways to use Thresh's abilities and even more ways to use them in different combinations with one another. There's certainly more than I have covered in this video, and I may be interested in making another one. If there's any reliable Thresh ability combos that you use, I'd love to hear them, whether you're a support Thresh, an AD Thresh, or River Thresh, so feel free to comment them below. That's all for this video, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.